I can't count the number of times I have people asking me to analyze their Fortnite gameplay or coach them, so I decided to finally do it. I chose 4 subscribers who are some of the biggest supporters of the WMJack YouTube channel, and broke down their mistakes and what they did right in the recent divisional cups. While I was making this video, something I noticed about a lot of my subscribers is that you guys are on high ping. But there is a way to improve your in-game ping. I generally don't do ping tweak recommendations because honestly, most of them aren't really that great, but exit lag is the exception to that rule. Exit lag is a connection optimizer that uses AI route optimization and multipath technology to find a faster, more stable connection to the game server in real time. It helps reduce ping, packet loss, and disconnects. I've personally been using exit lag for a while now, and when I tested it on NA Central, my ping literally dropped from 48 to 35 instantly, and that decrease in ping allowed me to play with a much more aggressive playstyle. Setting it up is really straightforward too. I just created an account, downloaded the latest version, selected Fortnite in the app, and hit apply routes, and immediately my builds and edits felt so much smoother. It also has a diagnostic center that lets you see exactly what's happening with your connection, so you're not guessing why your game is lagging. If you play a lot of competitive Fortnite, you know how important ping is to your success. So if you want to try exit lag for yourself, you can get 50% off by using my link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. Plus, you'll get a free month of Discord Nitro Basic with the annual plan. The first player that we're going to look at is Zilla. Zilla and his duo, the Apple Eater, landed the ski lift station south of Lofty Lodge before moving over to it. They're able to get to the main lodge before the other team appears, but Zilla takes a lot of damage. They trade a little bit of damage in the off spawn, and Zilla's teammate gets taken down by the Invisible Man thanks to replay mode. Zilla makes the correct call to overdrive away, but a small tip when he's flying through the air like this is to either start popping his chug jug mid-air or look behind him to react and build. Thankfully, the opponents didn't have an angle on him, but he could have been healing or protecting himself during this time. Zilla runs into Storm, which is a good call in this situation, and is able to get the reboot off, and after a little bit of trouble, him and his teammate make it into zone. Zilla ended up having to reboot twice and was in Storm for quite a while, but it was good to keep an even temper and not push another team out of frustration, as running out of games is a huge issue in Div Cups. Zilla and Apple do a good job at wrapping around the side of the mountain and sticking to dead side for 5th zone, but they end up trying to fight a player mid-rotate for a refresh, which causes them to not be ready to move right away for the 6th zone. They do get held when they rotate, but fortunately the lobby was pretty dead, so it ended up not being a huge deal. In the 7th zone though, they decide to wrap on the left side of zone, which ended up being a big mistake. Because the previous zone came in from the north, that was the congested side, as many teams had boxed up on the edge. They tried to go through congested side, and Zilla's duo ended up going down from it, while dead side was completely free if they had just run the other way. Zilla is now a solo, and he does a good job of getting to the front side of zone in this situation. Zilla then rotates on foot and wraps on the edge of zone for the 8th zone, which is good, and he manages to get to the front side in some old builds. He's playing really safe with his mats, and is in a good position, and he's able to one-pump an opponent to take him out. Zilla does make a smart play and tries to pressure this player's duo, as he needs this refresh and he needs the opponent to leave, but he second guesses himself mid-pressure and stops. Zilla double pickaxes and the opponent is able to open up on him as he's caught reloading a shotgun. While Zilla was weak in this situation, the game wasn't over yet. There was no real chance he'd be able to get his refresh at this point, but he stalled long enough to where he'd be able to get the siphon as the teammate wouldn't be able to get the res off. He could have cut his losses and disengaged to play for a little more placement with his 32 builds and healed up with his minis and the siphon. Instead though, he keeps trying to fight and waits for too long, and goes down because of it. Here's another quick example from Zilla. In this situation, him and his teammate are in a long range fight, and he makes a smart call to move towards his teammate if they wanted to play defensively. But multiple times here, Zilla doesn't cover himself by building wood to block tags. It may seem simple, but wood is so easy to re-farm, and the continuous tags is what causes these opponents to jump on them. Both opponents then drop onto Zilla's wall, and he should have instantly expanded in this situation, since both opponents were pressuring him at once. Instead, he tries to edit and lets the wall get taken, and is as good as dead at this point. Since Zilla was weak, he should have built a stair for 2 layers of protection and instantly conceded that the wall was taken, which led to his death. Now let's move to the next player, Foa. Foa and his duo landed this inner loop station right outside of Sinister Strip, where they loot up through the tunnels, and he's able to get an early kill on a player running away to start up their game. They spray an opponent for a lot of damage out of the air here, and Foa overdrives toward them and he gets separated. The opponent's teammate ends up pressuring Yachty though, and Foa makes the right call to get to his teammate as soon as possible to double the new opponent, where Foa has some really nice piece here, but gets a little lucky for the kill only on 2 HP. If Foa had stayed on the stair and crouched and then jumped up when he opened, he could have had a really nice peek and not taken so much damage. Regardless Regardless though, it turned out to be a kill, and they can keep moving afterwards. We see another situation where they notice a player running at them and make a smart lurk play to take the opponent out super quickly. But Yachty did get hit hard, and his shields were cracked now. Bo makes a mistake here in his strategy. In this last fight, we saw him instantly go to his teammate to have a 2v1 in this fight. In this situation though, Boa gets tunnel vision on the down body while his teammate gets pushed on 100 HP by the other player on the duo. His teammate shouldn't go down here and should play more defensive, but Foa also could have totally prevented this had he just stayed on his teammate, gave him time to heal, and then played the 2v1 together. Foa's teammate did take a chunk of the opponent's HP here, but this fight dragged on for over a minute and a half before Foa can finish him, which is time that could have been spent rebooting or rotating. Regardless though, Foa's able to get his teammate back up, and they can refarm mats. They pull the 6th zone, which is huge for them due to their lackluster materials, but unfortunately the 7th zone is a far pull for them. A smart play here could have been to have their overdrives ready in case it pulls far, so they could go immediately and base up on the front of zone, giving them the chance to look back and get zone priority. Instead, they go when the zone starts to pull and their side is fairly congested, but Yachty's able to find a refresh here, so it ended up working out for them. They use their mats to get in, and they do a good job of replacing the accidentally built wood walls with hard mats just to be safe. They overdrive when the 8th zone starts to pull and do a decent job of staying together. They do another smart rotate here, throw an overdrive in the box and run on the right side of zone, playing low ground as it's totally free in this situation. For the 9th zone though, they go quickly and it didn't feel like they scouted the rotate as a team enough as they end up going to opposite side of zone and wasting mats because of it. Boa sees some mats and does a great job to box it up, but they get really greedy for the next rotate. With the amount of materials they had, they easily could have full tarped or built more as they moved with only 15 total players left, but they try and run it where they get jumped on and Yachty goes down. Boa manages to take a player down, but gets awareness checked when he goes for the loot in this box and can't really do anything from this point, dying with 600 materials. If they had just full tarped and moved together on the edge of zone, this wouldn't have happened as they wouldn't have been as susceptible to getting cut off, and dying while still having so many mats is never a good thing. Here's another situation on rotate where Foa and his duo are moving in the 5th zone. Yachty starts shooting at another team on rotate, which can sometimes be good to keep a clear path, but can also lead to you getting griefed. And players in lower divisions like Div 3, which Foa is playing in, can sometimes be pretty emotional. Foa does a good job of blocking any counterfire originally, but then fully turns his back to the other team and moves to zone. Unfortunately, these did seem to be some pretty emotional kids who they shot at, and Foa gets jumped on and taken down. While this situation may seem unsolvable as he kinda just got jumped on and quick deaded, there was a clear cue that Foa should have checked for. You can hear the overdrive happening behind them, and Foa doesn't turn around until he's already been shot. With the team that close to them, checking your back when you hear this sound would have been crucial and could have saved his life, as even turning around 1 second earlier would have given him enough time to block them off. Let's move on to our next player, Easy. Easy and his duo land on the south side of Shaken Sanctuary, Tongue Twister, where they loot up pretty quickly and move toward the center of zone, keeping good pace. Easy ends up running into a player and goes for a good peek shot and boxes up, not really looking to pick a fight. He tries to rebox but edits a little bit too slowly and misses his reset, causing him to get pumped. A simple mistake that can be fixed pretty easily with some mechanics practice. He does do well to keep moving back though and box in a 2x1 and then disengages, which is the smart thing to do in most div cups as there's such little points for getting kills, and playing for placement is so much more valuable. Easy and his teammate make it to 4th zone, and he keeps getting shot on rotate in this situation. While saving your movement for endgame is pretty tempting, in a situation like this, using an overdrive or two to make it into zone safely can save a ton of mats and health. Think about most games you have played this season where you've made it far into the endgame. A lot of the time, you often have quite a few overdrives still in your inventory, and spoiler alert for this game, Easy ends the game with quite a few overdrives in his inventory that he could have used here to move quicker and avoid taking damage. They do make it in where they can refarm metal, and the 5th zone is a really nice pull, and they wait a few seconds longer than I would like, but move quicker than anyone else in the video so far ahead of the 5th zone, so that was good. They pull the 6th zone, and are now in a really solid spot for a good game. And again, the 7th zone is a solid pull for Easy and his duo. They make an interesting play that I actually don't mind in this situation. Instead of overdriving together, since they pulled a couple zones, they have a surplus of overdrives, so they solo shock one at a time to make sure Easy can follow Kurosu on the rotate. Again in the 8th zone, they make another solid rotate, where they overdrive and take a higher layer to set up for the next rotation and look for picks. They overdrive for 9th zone and play low ground, which is really smart in this point in the game, as they can start looking for refreshes on players with not many mats or solos who have gravitated toward the low ground. Kurosu drops a player into their box, who they take out easily for a refresh, and they now have to move quickly here, where they cut through the center of zone, and Easy misses his box here, and instead of placing a wall to his left and trying to edit into his box, he jumps out the side to rebox and gets pumped because of it. This was a bit of a panic play, but something that could be good to practice is his close range wall edits when he's really uptight to the wall. As you can tell, he didn't want to make this edit in this situation in a laggy endgame, and he messed it up earlier in the game too. They're able to make it to the low ground again though and heal up some, and Easy gets a kill in Storm. They did a good job to drop to low ground again when it pulls down down the hill, putting themselves in a good position with the amount of mats they have. Easy takes the wall of a solo, but misses his wall edit to get a tag. He sees a ton of loot in zone, and goes for it, and now he has a ton of mats, and decides it's time to go for height. The one problem is that he did this without regrouping with his teammate, which caused his teammate to be left as a solo on a lower elevation, where he goes down. If Easy had gone back to his teammate, they could have pressured height together, or just played low ground with all of their mats, where they probably would have at least gotten a top 2 with how many mats they had instead of 5th place when Easy gets chopped out on height as a solo. Here's another situation where a couple small mistakes from Easy could have allowed him to get many more points in this game. They rotate early in the 6th zone, which I like, but have to pause as his teammate got hit for his shield. In this situation, it's important that you're not greedy or lazy with your boxes. It's best to make sure you're fully boxed up if you're pausing and one player is weak, and Easy leaves a couple openings where he gets hit for most of his shield. They overdrive again into zone and try and base up on some loot, but get sprayed by a few teams. Although getting lobby focused is always an unfortunate situation, Easy goes down too easily here by accidentally standing in the stair and not being protected by 2 layers. If possible in this situation when getting focused, investing a ton of your hard mats to expand to make it more difficult for the opponents to find you and spray you should be your instant reaction. It's not foolproof, but it's better to be alive with only a few mats than dead with a lot of them. The final player we're going to be looking at is Flop. In this game, Flop and his duo land at Wonky Land and are able to get an easy off-spawn kill to start out the match. They get a decent zone pull and use the Wonky wheel to rotate, where they rotate to the north side of the map, which is the dead side of zone. When they rotate in, a team is pressuring them, and in this situation, Flop gets tagged quite a bit, which causes the opponents to overdrive toward him and double him, where he gets taken out. Flop could have avoided this death if he had just built a box or 2 preemptively, as his back wouldn't have been open to his opponent in this situation. Instead, he was a little greedy, which allowed him to get jumped without much protection. Flop's teammate is able to get him back up, and Flop is able to get himself back into a decent position going into the endgame, where they manage to end up on full dead side in the 5th zone. The zone pulls to the west, allowing Flop and his duo to rotate pretty freely, where they hit a pad and take a really nice spot on top of this cliff here, setting them up perfectly for future rotates. Normally, I don't love using your glider past the 5th or 6th zone since you can get beamed out of the air pretty easily, but they were so far away from most of the teams that it ended up being okay. Flop and Juanito make a kind of bizarre play here though. They go for a lurk onto the team above them, when they were already in a very good position. This felt really greedy and unnecessary in this position, and they got kinda lucky to not get beamed by another team. For the 7th zone, they need to communicate a little better on their rotate in this situation, but Flop does a good job to make it to his teammate here even if the overdrive was a little scuffed. For the 8th zone, they do a better job of setting up the overdrive, but get separated, and neither player does a very good job of getting back together. Flop tries to ramp height but gets shot out, and Juanito ends up going down here, leaving Flop as a solo. Flop found a huge refresh though, and makes an aggressive play, which he didn't really need to do in this situation with how many mats that he has. But he regroups and does a nice overdrive rotate from the back of zone where he's able to take a high layer here. Flop does a good job of changing his elevation as he rotates as a solo in this situation, making sure to not stay on one layer for too long. For the 9th zone, something I really like that Flop does on this rotate is this really quick look backward and the floor to block behind him. He knows the coast is clear in front of him, and this small scan behind gave a ton of information for this rotate. Flop takes the front of low ground for his rotate in the 10th zone, and since he's on low ground, he's able to find a refresh on a weak solo. Flop does a really good job of using his mats in this situation, and he doesn't get greedy and try and run it. Instead, he tarps on the edge of zone, which is the ideal position in later zones like this. He makes it in for the 11th zone, and starts to tank Storm with his Chug Jug since he only had 14 builds left at this point. Flop gets a fortunate siphon and refresh when he moves back into the zone, and he now has almost 40 builds from this, and again does a great job of recognizing that he now has mats to use, where he full tarps with his hard mats on the edge of zone to stay safe. Flop unfortunately doesn't realize though that the player to his left had his wall, and takes a lot of damage, and from this point, it's tough to come back in this situation, and he goes down in 3rd place. In this next clip, Flop lands at Chop's shop, where they're contested off spawn. Flop's teammate gets hit hard off spawn, and because of that, they run to the beach on the edge of the POI. Flop and his teammate get pushed, and make an aggressive overdrive play to try and take out the other team, knowing they've backed themselves into a corner, but are actually able to take down the opponents. Flop revives his teammate, but there's now another team here. They make the mistake of moving back to the corner of the POI here instead of lurking around their metal builds and waiting to see what the opponents would do, and Flop ends up taking a lot of damage. They're pretty much in an unwinnable fight now with nowhere to disengage to, and because of this they go down. It was a tough situation to start with, but moving to this corner repeatedly made the fight that much harder since they were always on the low ground. Thanks again to my subscribers in this video. I gave priority to people who are subscribed to me on Twitch or are really active in my community, so check out my Discord and Twitch linked in the description in case I make another one of these videos again, if this one does well. And if you're interested in how different players from each division qualified to the next one, check out the video on screen.